The air smelled of hay and morning frost as Isabella Moore stood at the gate of Moorfield Farm, a leather bag slung over her shoulder. The sun hadn't yet risen, but the distant whir of the milking machine had already begun. Her father, Robert Moore, was inside the barn, unaware that today, his daughter wouldn't be helping with the cows. Instead, she was leaving. 24 years old, full of dreams, and hopelessly in love with a man named Oliver Grant, a charming marketing executive from London who had promised her the world. They had met in Bath, during the annual Agricultural Expo. She had only been there to deliver milk samples. He had been there on business, and yet he had stayed by her stand longer than anyone else. "You don't belong in muddy boots, Bella," he had once whispered, his hand brushing hers. "You belong in heels, in the city, with me." And she believed him. That morning, she left behind a note on the kitchen table. "Dad, I'm going to London. I need to see if this life is really mine. I'll write soon. Love, Bella." She walked to the station alone, her boots still caked with soil from the milking yard. The train pulled in with a gust of cold wind and screeching brakes. As she stepped inside, she didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen her father standing at the top of the lane, watching her from the distance. London was everything Oliver had promised, loud, alive, and shimmering with promise. She moved into his flat in Clerkenwell, with its tall windows and slate-grey walls. He took her to rooftop bars and art galleries, wrapped her in silk scarves, and introduced her as my Dorset girl who escaped the mud. But as the months passed, something shifted. Oliver became distant. He stayed later at work, spoke less over dinner, and when she mentioned the farm or her father, he'd wave a hand and say, "Darling, not everything's a soap opera." One evening, as she waited for him to come home, she checked his coat pocket, only to find 2 tickets to Venice. The problem was, they weren't in her name. Her hands trembled as she sat on the edge of the bed. She stared at the tickets, at the neatly printed names, Oliver Grant and Madeline Carter. The flat that once felt like a dream now felt like a trap. That night, Oliver didn't return. And by morning, Isabella was gone. Isabella's boots crunched on the gravel path as she stepped off the bus in Moorfield Village. The familiar scent of damp earth and wildflowers filled her lungs, grounding her after years away. The village looked smaller than she remembered, the old bakery shuttered, the post office replaced by a cafe serving overpriced coffee. She felt a pang of guilt. Years had passed since she'd left her family farm and her father behind. She hadn't written much, too ashamed, too broken. The farm came into view, its stone walls worn and moss-covered. The fields were overgrown, the barns sagging under neglect. A "for sale" sign creaked in the wind. Isabella's heart clenched. This was not the thriving farm she'd dreamed of returning to. The house door creaked open, and a tall man stepped out. It was Daniel, her childhood friend, now the farm's manager. His face was lined with worry but brightened when he saw her. "Bella? Is that really you?" She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'm back. To help." Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "We need you. The bank's been pushing, and the neighbors have been talking. They say the Morse are done for." Isabella took a deep breath. She would have to face not only the land but also the past she'd buried deep. That night, she sat by the fireplace, her father's old jacket wrapped around her. Letters unopened for years lay scattered on the table, his words full of hope, longing, and regret. Tomorrow, she decided, she would start fighting. For the farm. For her family. And for herself. The morning mist clung to the fields as Isabella rose early, determined to face the day. The farmhouse kitchen was cold, its once bright walls faded and stained by years of neglect. She lit the old gas stove, the flicker of the flame casting shaky shadows. Outside, the crows cawed in the distance, a reminder that life here moved at its own slow pace. Daniel arrived soon after, bringing news that both warmed and chilled her. "The farm's in worse shape than I thought," he said, handing her a crumpled sheet of paper, the latest bank statement. "We're behind on mortgage payments by 6 months. If we don't pay up soon, they'll seize everything." Isabella swallowed hard. Every penny she'd earned in London felt like a lifetime ago. She forced herself to stand. "We'll find a way. Maybe start with the cattle. Sell some of the less productive ones, keep the best. I'll talk to the neighbors, maybe arrange some work." Daniel nodded, but his eyes were clouded with doubt. Word spread quickly through Moorfield of Isabella's return. Some neighbors whispered sympathy, others suspicion. The local pub was crowded that evening, the familiar chatter turning to curious glances as Isabella entered. Maggie Perkins, the baker's wife, approached her cautiously. "It's good to see you back, Isabella. But people wonder, why now? You left when the farm needed you most." Isabella met her gaze steadily. "I left to find out who I was. But I'm here now. And I'm not leaving again." That night, sleep came slowly. Memories of London haunted her, the silken scarves, the empty dinners, the loneliness behind the laughter. She'd chased a dream, only to find it was a mirage. Yet, here in the cold farmhouse, something real was waiting. She resolved to visit the local council office the next day, to inquire about grants for farmers in distress. She'd learned from Oliver that city life was full of schemes and shortcuts, but here, she would build slowly, brick by brick. At dawn, Isabella stepped into the fields. The land was wild, tangled with weeds and brambles. She knelt, running her fingers through the damp soil. This earth was her heritage, her fight. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number: "If you want to save the farm, meet me at the old mill tomorrow. Come alone." A chill ran down her spine. The following evening, under a slate-grey sky, Isabella made her way towards the old mill on the outskirts of Moorfield. The path was narrow, bordered by hedgerows heavy with hawthorn berries. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and moss. Her heart thudded with a mixture of hope and fear. The mill was a crumbling relic, its water wheel long since still, its stones stained with age and neglect. Isabella paused, glancing around to make sure no one followed her. Then a voice called softly from the shadows. "Isabella." She turned to see a figure step forward. It was Martin, a local farmer who had once been a close friend of her father. "I didn't know if you'd come," he said, his eyes wary but kind. "Who sent you the message?" she asked. "Me," Martin replied. "There's more to the farm's troubles than just money. Someone's been sabotaging the land, cutting fences, poisoning water troughs. And it's been happening since you left." Isabella's breath caught. She had sensed hostility in the village, but this was something darker. "Why would anyone do this?" she asked, voice trembling. Martin shrugged. "Some people don't want the farm to survive. Your father's debts, old rivalries, it's complicated." He pulled a folded envelope from his coat and handed it to her. "This came for you," he said. "From your father, before he died. He wanted you to have it when the time was right." Isabella opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, written in her father's familiar scrawl. "Bella, if you're reading this, then you've come home. There's more than land at stake. Trust no one completely, but trust your heart. You are stronger than you know. Fight for the farm. Fight for us." Tears blurred her vision. Martin placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone." The night deepened as they spoke of plans to protect the farm and expose those who wished it harm. Isabella felt a flicker of determination ignite within her, a resolve to reclaim not only the farm but her family's legacy. Days passed as Isabella and Martin worked quietly, gathering evidence and allies among the villagers. She began to learn who she could trust, and who kept their distance. The fractures in Moorfield were deeper than she expected. At the village market, Isabella overheard whispers about her. Some spoke of her return with curiosity, others with resentment. Her mother's old friend, Mrs. Crawford, approached her cautiously. "It's brave of you to come back," Mrs. Crawford said softly. "But be wary. Not everyone here wants the past to be uncovered." Isabella nodded. "I know. But I need to know what happened to my father, and to this farm." That night, she sat in the dim light of the farmhouse, poring over letters and documents her father had left behind. Among them was a ledger filled with transactions, debts, and suspicious payments. One name kept appearing, a wealthy landowner from a neighboring town, Mr. Harold Finch. It seemed Finch had a vested interest in acquiring the farm. Isabella's resolve hardened. She decided to confront Finch at his estate in Wiltshire. Daniel, wary but supportive, agreed to accompany her. The day of the visit dawned cold and grey. The Finch estate loomed large, its wrought iron gates guarded by stern-faced men. Inside, Mr. Finch greeted them with a polite but cold smile. "I understand you have questions about the farm," Finch said smoothly. "I'm happy to clarify anything." Isabella didn't mince words. "We know about the debts, the sabotage. You stand to benefit from my family's ruin." Finch's smile faded. "Business is business, Miss Moore. If your family couldn't keep up, it's not my concern." But Isabella wasn't done. "I will fight for this farm, and expose every lie." As they left, Isabella felt a mixture of anger and determination. The battle for her home had only just begun. Back at the farmhouse, the tension grew thicker. Isabella confided in Martin and Daniel about the confrontation with Finch. The two men exchanged worried glances. "There's more at stake than just land," Martin warned. "Some of the villagers might be working with Finch, hoping to profit from your downfall." Isabella's heart sank. She realized the betrayal might be closer than she thought. That evening, as dusk settled over Moorfield, Isabella found a note slipped under her door. It was brief and chilling. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Fear mingled with defiance. Isabella refused to back down. Determined to find allies, she visited the local church the next morning. There, she met Reverend Thompson, a man known for his quiet strength and fairness. "I've heard about your father and the troubles here," the Reverend said. "If anyone can help, it's the community. But they need to believe in the fight." Isabella spoke passionately about her father's legacy and the need to protect the farm from greed and deceit. Slowly, villagers began to step forward. A farmer shared his knowledge of suspicious activity near the water source. A shopkeeper spoke of strange visitors at odd hours. Each piece of information brought Isabella closer to the truth, and deeper into danger. One night, as she locked up the farmhouse, shadows moved nearby. A figure lurked in the darkness, watching her. The fight for Moorfield had become personal. The days grew colder, and the weight of the battle pressed heavily on Isabella's shoulders. Yet she refused to yield. With the support of Martin, Daniel, Reverend Thompson, and the growing number of villagers, she prepared for the ultimate confrontation. Documents, testimonies, and photographs gathered meticulously were ready to be presented to the local council. Isabella knew this was her last chance to save the farm and clear her father's name. On a crisp morning, the community hall in Moorfield filled with townsfolk. Among them were supporters and skeptics, all awaiting the truth. Isabella stood before them, voice steady but full of passion. "My father loved this land," she began. "He worked hard to keep it alive despite the hardships. But some chose greed over honesty and sabotaged what we built. Today, I bring evidence of their deeds." One by one, she laid out the facts: payments to unknown contractors, damaged fences, poisoned wells, and connections to Mr. Finch. Murmurs filled the room. Then, a villager stepped forward. "I saw a group at the farm late one night. "They were working against you, Isabella." Another added, "We can't let this continue. We must protect our community." The tide began to turn. Soon after, local authorities launched an investigation based on the evidence. Mr. Finch and his accomplices faced legal action, and the farm was declared protected land. Isabella exhaled deeply. The road ahead remained long, but hope blossomed where once there was only despair. As she looked out over the fields, she felt a new chapter of her life was beginning, one where truth and resilience would lead the way. With the legal battles behind her and the farm secure, Isabella began to rebuild not only the land but also her life. The community's trust, once fragile, had been restored. Together, they worked the fields, shared stories, and celebrated small victories. Isabella felt the weight of her past lifting. She honored her father's memory by planting a new orchard at the edge of the farm, a symbol of growth, hope, and renewal. Daniel and Martin became steadfast friends, their bond strengthened by the trials they had endured. Reverend Thompson continued to guide the village, inspiring kindness and unity. One afternoon, Isabella stood beneath the blossoming trees, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of fresh earth and promise. Her journey had been difficult, filled with pain and betrayal. Yet it had led her to discover the strength within herself and the power of community. The farm was no longer just a place, it was a testament to resilience and love. As the sun set over Moorfield, Isabella knew that though the past would always be a part of her, the future was hers to shape.